Well, thank you very much. So this is a really nice extension from what Lucretia was talking about. We really focus just on bioacoustics. The reason we do that is my background, I was a software engineer, I was a bird ringer, is what's living in the land or the air is the ultimate expression of the whole ecosystem. You know, if you've got a good healthy population of birds or insects, it reflects good quality water. Now, I would also say, depending on the thing you're trying to solve, there are many different technologies. Each has their own strengths and weaknesses. So obviously, I'm only going to talk about bioacoustics. It has a role in many projects, but there are weaknesses and strengths as there are with every other technology. So the problem we're trying to solve is today, most bird, bat, insect species level data is collected by field ecologists. It's very time consuming. It's biased. It's biased by the skill of the ecologist in the field. Some are better identifying plants, say, than birds. I do a lot of bird surveying myself, and I know looking at previous surveys, doing a direct comparison over time can be very difficult because of their different levels of skill or whatever. And the weather on the day of the survey can have a big impact, and you'll see that in the data we have. And this simply doesn't scale. It can take years and years and years to develop a really good ornithologist, for example, who can listen to all the calls and identify most of them, and they're obviously very regional. Being a good bird observer in Europe isn't the same as being one in South America, for example. And there's a big problem with inconsistency. You have two ecologists doing the same survey on the same site at different times, and the results will be different. So but also drone and satellite technology, while it's incredibly powerful for condition monitoring and all that kind of stuff, it can't really detect the small attacks that are present. And this is the core part of the food chain. So we can start to address this problem through long-term, accurate species-level analysis of sound. So we use these audio files and then AI to analyze those audio files. The other thing we're finding time and time again, that these assemblages of species can be really sensitive to environmental change. You know, if a site's being degraded because of selective logging, or if it's the peat's being drained or the wetlands being improved, these taxa will respond really quickly. And the other thing I'd just suggest, the way we think about it is, you know, if you're doing an ecological survey or whatever, you're taking a photograph, you're doing a single site, single point in time photograph of what species are present. But we think about this as a video. If you can do continual recording over years, you know, maybe season to season or year to year, it becomes more of a video. So you can see the long-term changes over time. And we've got sites been running for a few years now, collecting where we've got 4 or 5 million species level records. So we do this. By the way, we're often part of a bigger project. Our data goes into perhaps another platform, which is much broader, such as the platform Lucretia was talking about. So we design a survey methodology. You know, what's the question you're trying to solve? Is it about wetland bird species return, or is it regenerative agriculture? And quite often we'll put multiple recorders per site. We deploy the passive recorders. We don't provide the recorders. There's plenty available in the market. We work with any recorder which produces the right quality sound. And many ecologists have their own that they bought for other projects. And our platform is currently used by a lot of ecologists, nature-based NGOs, some government agencies. We've got people using it for renewable energy, for, say, developing solar farms, mining for site restoration or environmental impact assessments. And we have quite a number of projects on peatland sites, wetland sites, site restoration. And we're involved with some very specific projects like the Future Forest Index, where the Future Forest Index is focused on a number of indicators like standing deadwood, species mix, etc. We're not involved in any of that, but we're only involved in understanding the bird diversity and how it changes in line with the maturity of the woodland. And in the UK, there's a major project on the temperate rainforest recovery, replanting oak trees and bringing in hopefully recovering all the really sensitive indicator species. So the recorders get installed in line with the strategy. The files get uploaded to our website. We run all the AI, we sample every 3 seconds and tell you what species it is. And then that generates all sorts of insights, and that may affect the site plan. Things are going better or worse. So it works specifically. You put the recorders out, files get uploaded. The AI analyzes the sounds. If we get an hour-long file, for example, we sample it every 3 seconds to see what species has made a sound and assigns a probability. Is it 83% or 46% of that species? It takes us about 20 seconds to analyze an hour-long file. And we have to apply a filter because you get so much data. So we apply a filter based on location probability or confidence to end up with a data set which is an accurate representation of what's present over time. And because it goes into a big data lake, and then you can develop whatever index or analysis, which I'll show you in a second. This happens to be from a woodland site. This is a special woodland index that one of our customers asked us to look at. And you can see on the red line the number of species we're picking up from that index, but also the different birds that are making up that date. And so, if you've got recorders running long term, a site with 4 recorders in a fairly average European site will produce 1 million species level records a year. So you're getting massive insights into behavior, distribution. You can't directly measure abundance, but you can do some approximations for abundance. So this example I'm going to use is from a TV program we were involved with last year. So anyone based in the UK will know about this program called Springwatch. So Springwatch has been running for 20 years, I think now, and it's live broadcast for 3 weeks, and there's lots of cameras on the nests and a live broadcast. So we were on this last year, and we'll be on it again this year. So we put 6 recorders out for 6 weeks. We recorded 7,000 hours of audio. We identified just over 430,000 calls from 89 species, and we found this. And this is a very well watched site. This is in the south of England. It's an RSPB site. Lots and lots of visitors. We found a species they hadn't seen before, hadn't heard before, which is a wood warbler. There's a link on the bottom there to the episode. About 25 minutes in. I suspect if you're outside the UK, you might not be able to get access to it. But if you drop me a line, I can send you a copy of the clip. Needless to say, the presenters got really excited about what this can do. So I'm going to show you the data from this episode. So hopefully you can see my screen, and this is the base version of what we do. This is going to change quite radically imminently. So here are the recorders. This is our SP balance. So there's 6 recorders. I've got hundreds of recorders in this data set. I've got access to all the recorders we have. Which time period you're interested in, which species. You'd only see species pertinent to your site, but because I've got access to all the sites, you're obviously picking up species on projects that we're working all around the world. And we think about detection confidence, 0.85 or 85%, and location probability. Now, this particular data set from ARN, so with that, those criteria, and you can change the criteria. We've got 230,000 records. Chiff chaff, there's 47,000. There's a bit of eye candy. It gives you a sense of what the most common birds are. And then again, there's many ways of analyzing the data. This is a count by sensor. So this is the different recorders, ARN1 to ARN6. And you can see how many calls we're picking up on each site. And we find time and time again, the distribution of the species on the site can be quite surprising. Some species you'd expect to have a distribution. Canada geese are next to the water, for example. Coal tits, again, is very specific habitats. And we think the bird assemblage can give you a very tight definition of a habitat, not just the plant assemblage. So on this one, we got I think it was 90 species or something. So a lot of rich habitats. And if you're into your birds, you can look at this list and you can probably tell me which habitat these were from, because they're so distinctive. And greater spotted woodpecker, that was in a patch of woodland where we had other birds, great tits and goshawk and things that really are good examples of what's present in that habitat. But again, there's many ways we can analyze the data. This is, again, a very simple graph of number of calls per hour. So what's the pattern of calls? And this kind of reflects the lived experience. If you're in a habitat, you'll see dawn chorus starting at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and the assemblage starts to change during the day. I won't go into this too much detail. And this is, again, count by day. We find that the call rate per day is affected by the temperature the night before, and obviously the climate conditions on the day, if it's raining or if it's windy. either they're calling less frequently or there's so much background noise we're not picking up as many. So we get a lot of data start to inform behavior. There's lots of examples of behavior I haven't got time to go into today. And this is just another graph. This is only recorded from 6 weeks, but you can see in each month the call pattern during the day. We've got dawn chorus, drops off and then picks up again towards the end of the day and then drops off at 9 or 10 o'clock. And this is in May. I'll skip past that one. And this one is where we can start to look at things like species richness. So these are, again, the 6 recorders. On one at the top is from a site where it was next to an old clay pit, which was flooded. So we're getting a lot of aquatic species, but it was also adjacent to some woodland. So we're getting a rich assemblage from different habitats. Whereas on 5, this one here was typically the lowest, and it should have been even lower, except there was a massive bomb crater from the Second World War next to the site. So we're picking up a lot of water bird species as well, and it would have been even worse. We can, if we go back to the top, if you want to, some of the professional ecologists want to explore the data, so we reduce the detection confidence so that they can do. So if I reduce it down to say 75%, we've gone from 230,000 records to 380,000 records. So we've got a much bigger data set, lower quality, but higher quantity. I'm going to whip through a couple of these things before I wrap up. So we can start to develop specific indices. This happens to be what's called a farmland bird index, which is a standard index for the UK, which is defined by these species. It's species which is very specific to this habitat. So we can see on the green line how many we're getting each day. And in reality, we'd smooth this. We'd do it weekly or monthly or year over year to see if that index is improving or declining. And you can see which species are making up that index. And then there's lots of other indices we can bring in. This is indices of raptors, of birds of prey, and we've included a raven because it's in effect a raptor functionally. Lowland fen bird index. This is for lowland peatland sites, which species are present and how they're changing over time. Especially so once we've got the data, we can express it in different ways depending on the customer need. Last thing I'll do, because I think I'm going to run out of time, we can start to look at specific species if we want. So I've got all these other exotic species from other sites, but if I look at something like oyster catcher, so we've got 44,000 records of oyster catchers across the different sites, mostly on ARN1, again, very specific distribution across the site. And this is a species which calls all day and all night. If you want a very simple validation of the data, if you look at a tawny owl or an owl, as that example, you just look at the data and it's caught, all the records are from nighttime. Yet that's a fair expression of what we would expect to have in from that species. So you can do some simple validation. I haven't got time to go into today, but you can also go to individual species and go back and listen to the calls saying, was that a particular species? On this particular data set, we picked up a bird called a wood warbler, never been recorded at RSPBR, and the researchers are going back and listening to the calls and say, yep, that was definitely a wood warbler. And so they understand, some of the scarcer species that are present on the site. And we've been picking up all kinds of rare stuff all around the UK and Europe. In fact, we did a project in the Peruvian Amazon where we found a bird called a little nightjar, which hadn't been recorded within 100 kilometers. But the researchers go back and listen to the calls and check that was actually present in that landscape. So let me continue with one last slide. So I think I'll be running out of time. Is that right? So why bioacoustics? Because it's one of the many tools that are available, as shown within this session today. So when I set this up, I wanted something which was people can relate to the results, what's present in the landscape. Can they see the birds or learn, saying, oh, you're telling me there's a yellowhammer or whatever. Well, what's a yellowhammer? We work with a lot of farmers who are curious about the site they're managing, but can they start to learn about this? So it's accurate for both long and short-term monitoring. We do a lot of work with ecologists on baseline surveys, for example, for 3, 4, 5 weeks. We'll work with any recording device as long as it's of the right quality. We use robust peer-reviewed models, 6,500 bird species, so it works not everywhere, but pretty much anywhere in the world. And we can process very large amounts of data. Data is no longer a constraint. Last week, we generated over 1 million species level records in one day. Results are easy to understand. We're building more and more analytics on top of the data.
I'm going to give you 30 more seconds, Jeff.
Okay, yeah. So, we can manage all your vast audio files. We can also keep the files so that in future years, as the models get better, we can reprocess them. Some videos on our website from previous webinars, and we have a webinar coming up on the 31st of March. Details on our webinar, and that's about regenerative agriculture. But one thing I would say, we can ask lots of new questions of the data now. We're getting such rich data sets, so things like abundance become kind of secondary. It's really about species distribution and changes over time and how birds are using it, or insects or whatever, are using a site. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to unmute the audience and allow them to ask questions by raising their hand or putting it in the chat. It's lovely to see this. Maybe you should definitely put in that video of the BBC as well in the chat if you have the link to it.
Sure.
Do we have anyone raising their hands?
I do have a question.
Go for it. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I had a question, actually two questions. Is one, the sensors usually you are using, it's like you have access, like live access to the data, or you have to collect the data every
At the moment, you have to collect the data on a regular basis.
Okay.
There are commercial devices coming out very soon, which will have a 4G connection, and so they'll be completely unattended. But that's just the market progression. It'll be out in the next few months.
Okay. And the second one is, when you are dealing with a new country, does it mean you have to fine tune your model for new species, or you already have a comprehensive database? Or
we have a pretty comprehensive database, but we do come across target species where there's no model available, and so we have to build them. I mean, and you can build them in different ways. I mean, in fact, I was on a call this morning with a company. They've got an endemic bird, which is it's one of the petrels. It nests throughout the year. They're flying at night. They nest in burrows. They're really hard to identify, to find. So I think there's only about 6 or 8 recordings in the world of this species. So we're going to have to use a multi-step process to say, we've got these recordings as a baseline, do some cluster analysis, identify more records, get them validated, and then build a model once you've got enough data from the field, but automating that process to make it really efficient. In the same way as if there's an amphibian, a frog or something, we can follow the same process, or a bat, which is unusual. We've got a project we're kicking off on a very single species analysis for a bat, one particular bat in Australia, where no model exists, and we'll build the model for that specific requirement.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And we've got one question from Tika. Did you want to say it out loud?
Sure. Yeah, I just saw validation in your flow of processing, and just wanted to know if you could speak a little bit more about that when you're talking about huge amounts of data coming in, and yeah, is it random selection, validating, some ground truthing? What's your process there?
It again depends on the project. So if it's we've had lots and lots of external validation done on most of the common species. We get a very high accuracy rate. But if there are species that is particularly sensitive, perhaps it's a critically endangered species or whatever, because we do get false positives, we get false negatives sometimes. We would encourage people to say, right, go and listen to the 10 or 20 calls or 50 calls or whatever of that bird, and check, say, against Xenocanto or one of the reference databases, to go back through and listen to the calls manually and check it's the case. Now, we've had cases where we've had, for the UK, really rare birds, black-crowned night heron, for example, where we had some calls that didn't seem quite right, other calls that seemed to be pretty good. It's only bred once before in the UK, and then the ecologist doing an on-site survey, I had a phone call at 7 o'clock one morning saying, Jeff, we've just seen a black-crowned night heron right next to one of the recorders. So yeah, we often the ecologist will do site surveys, but the ecologist would say, so instead of doing 6 site surveys, we'll do 3 site surveys, and put the recorders out as well. So they're trying to get the balance right between what's seen on site or heard on site and what we're picking up. And I think the two together can give you a really robust result.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And we have Stephanie who'd like to ask a question next from WeForest.
Thanks, Paige. Yeah, just curious, this might be a very basic question or obvious to the nature tech crowd, but I'm just wondering how the AI handles the audio processing when, for example, right now I can hear multiple birds singing at the same time. And so how does the AI handle that, and or how accurately would you say it handles that? Because you showed us earlier that you can change the sort of fidelity with that slider depending on what you want to see in the data set. So yeah, just curious about that.
So if every 3-second sample, it takes, or we can change it to overlapping samples or longer samples or whatever, but a 3-second sample, it'll identify any pattern against every species in the database. So potentially if there's 2 birds singing at the same time, it'll try and identify both. It's pretty hard, to be honest. It's pretty tough. But it'll say it was 65% certain it was one species, 95% certain it was another species. The way it works is you actually generate a record for every single bird in the database, most of which will be 0.0001% because it's so different. And we just take off the most likely records at least above 70%. But if you've got lots of birds singing, because we're getting so much data, as long as we're picking up each species within a minute or 5 minutes, it doesn't matter too much. I mean, dawn chorus, they're going to be competing all the time. And if you watch I'll try and find the link to the RSP, the Springwatch program, they were looking at how the dawn chorus was behaving when the different species that start singing and how they drop off. So you can get a lot of species level data, even when we can only identify once every 3 seconds. The other thing I would say as well, when we're working in really noisy environments, there's a site, it's a heavy manufacturing site, there's a lot of background noise from engines and machinery. We still get a good recovery of species. Not as good, and it may affect species which have lower frequency calls, because most human generated noises are lower frequency, but we still get very good identification levels.
Super. And just to reassure everyone, including Stephanie, we can absolutely ask these types of questions in this demo day forum.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Joff.